Domestic violence is actually a cause of homelessness. So there are various different estimates, but it's thought that like maybe a third to even 50% of homeless women are homeless actually because they were fleeing violence in their home.
One of the big myths that we see is that it only happens in low-income communities or only with this certain type of population. And we definitely have clients who are business women who have had to leave their homes because of fearing for their lives. And so often the clients that we work with have been isolated from their friends, their family members, their support networks, and often have been prevented from working, so they haven't had the ability to create economic independence or support themselves in any way, or even if they have been allowed to work, they have not benefited from any of their earnings. Those are taken immediately or are really controlled. That's probably the question that I get most often. Why doesn't someone just leave? And the reasons are so complex and different for every person. They include fear of retaliation, fear for one's own safety or the safety of the people they love. Oftentimes someone uses threats to harm someone as a way to control them, and that can be very terrifying to.
Also, domestic violence is very much about power and control. So these are what I would think of as like hostage-taking situations in which someone's life is so controlled by another person that getting away from that person becomes actually more dangerous in some ways than staying with them. All the domestic violence literature that's been done shows that one of the most dangerous things you can ever most dangerous times in a domestic violence relationship is when you're actually trying to get away or trying to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably a minimum of once a week in the Bay Area that we see a story about a woman who has been murdered by her partner or former partner. And nationally, it's probably every day that there's a story out there like that. And sometimes they're the only people that really know what is safest for them. Sometimes they know that it's actually going to be more dangerous to leave at that particular time. What it does when we say, well, why doesn't she just leave, is it really puts the blame on that victim, on that survivor, rather than asking, why does that person abuse? Why do
find a place to stay that's safe. Obviously, people are very trapped in certain neighborhoods in San Francisco where there are, single room occupancy hotels, and they can't actually even geographically get away from someone who's hurting them. So they're running into that person constantly. Other people are willing to tell somebody, for money or for drugs where someone is. So it's just an incredibly unsafe environment for people who are being hurt by their partners. No place to go, and we as a society can't really promise you that we will definitely protect you. Restraining orders do tend to work very well for people who actually feel like they have something to lose by being arrested. But of course, if you have a restraining order from someone who is just really has nothing to lose, right? They're not employed, they've been arrested before, they don't really care about whether they might get arrested again. A restraining order really isn't a very good protection against someone like that.
Casa's mission is to provide 24-hour-a-day support to survivors of domestic violence, and we do that through a 24-hour crisis line for adults and another line for teens. And then we have an emergency shelter program that's an up to 2-month program for survivors who need to leave an unsafe situation and who would most often otherwise be homeless without a shelter location to go to.
Constant struggle every year. And what people should remember about homelessness in San Francisco is that for anyone who's a victim of domestic violence, there are less than 80 shelter beds in the entire city. And those are beds for both women and children. So if one woman with 4 children goes into a shelter, that takes up, 5 beds. Francisco is at the forefront of eviction protection law and created a new law where victims of domestic violence cannot be evicted because of a crime occurring of domestic violence or stalking or sexual assault occurring in their apartment. And one thing that's really fabulous about the San Francisco law is that whereas the California state law requires that a woman have a restraining order or a police report saying that they're going to be getting a restraining order, the San Francisco law actually allows healthcare providers, social workers, domestic violence counselors to attest to the domestic violence so that people cannot be evicted even if they don't feel safe